What's going on, guys? Winter Kills here, and welcome to the fourth and final week with Drytron. If you guys have not seen last week's episode, I'll leave a link to it up here in the top right for you guys to check out, so you can get all caught up on what went down. But we've got a lot of things to talk about for everything that happened this past week, leading up to today, which is Saturday. But I do want to mention really quick that I am going to miss covering Drytron on this series. It's been an absolute blast to play a deck like this. Not only is it fun for me personally to play meta, but there's just been so many different things to dive into, to look at, to explore and test. Like, there are so many different ways you can play this deck. I've seen the Battle Lord engine, I've seen a Gishki engine, I've seen the traditional Fairy engine that we're on, and different variations of it, like with the pre-prep build that we did try for a few weeks. So there's so many different ways the deck can be played, and not only that, but it's a very rewarding deck if it is played and piloted correctly, which I've been noticing more and more as I've gained more experience with the deck. And of course, with that being said, it also does really punish incorrect play. I noticed that a lot more at the beginning of the series, but as we've progressed over this past month, I feel like I've been making better and better plays every time I sit down to play with the deck. So that's been nice to see that we've been improving quite a bit. Really enjoyed this deck. I am going to continue to play it probably on Tuesday locals and the next two Saturdays that will take place in between the end of this one Deckle month and the start of the next one, which, by the way, I haven't figured out what deck I'm going to be playing yet, but I should be letting you guys know at the end of this episode, so make sure you stick around for what deck I'll be piloting next for 1 month exclusively. Obviously, the main goal of tonight is to try to go 4-0 on that main event Saturday locals, because we've yet to do that in this series. Well, technically, we already have, and why don't I go ahead and fill you guys in on that real quick. Okay, so just a couple days ago, I played in my Tuesday locals, and for those that don't know, my locals has tournaments on Tuesday and Saturday. And I've usually been going to both every week just because I like playing in tournaments, I like the practice, and I just like playing Yu-Gi-Oh, you know? So I try to go as often as I possibly can. But I did go on Tuesday, and I actually ended up securing a 4-0 finish with Drytron, but of course I wasn't recording because I don't typically record on Tuesdays, since Saturday is more so like the main event locals where we normally have like 30 plus people show up, and on Tuesday we maybe have like half the turnout. I would say both are equally as competitive, but Saturday is sort of like the main event, if you will. And unfortunately, due to tiebreakers, I didn't get first, I got second, and my friend John, who also went 4-0 with the Virtual World, ended up securing first. But we still went 4-0, and we still snagged 30 store credit, which brings our total pool of credit to like, I don't know how much, but easily over like $100+ at this point in store credit. But needless to say, it was a fantastic locals experience. I actually have most of my matchups written down here in this notebook, so we're gonna go over them, and I'll also show you guys what my deck list looked like for that particular tournament. So round one, we ended up playing against Sky Striker, and I did lose the die roll, but my opponent goes first and plays multi-roll, Normal's Ray, and links Rishizuku to add a Widow in the end phase. He then activates the Widow, and then it gets reset by the multi-roll, and then he passes turn. Now, I got pretty lucky because I opened Alpha, Zeta, and Diviner, so needless to say, my hand was really cracked. I go Alpha, Zeta, you know, all that stuff, and then I normal the Diviner, and I think my opponent kind of gets the read that I can just send Entis to force his set Widow Anchor, and so on the activation of the Diviner, he activates Widow Anchor, which is completely fine. I then am in the clear to go into Mubeta to let that resolve. I think I send a copy of Gamma, summon Ben 10, and then I use, I think on the summon of Ben 10, he tried to Nibiru me, and I negate it with Orange Light, and then after that, he scoops immediately, because we definitely just had full combo at that point, and there was nothing he could do. And in game 2, I think the only thing I sided in was Twin Twister and Quadrantids, who is basically like a Harpy's Feather Duster on my turn. So I sided out Chaos Max for that because I didn't think we were going to be needing Chaos Max. Ultimately, leaving it in, though, would have actually been pretty good, just because it can't be targeted or destroyed by card effects, period, so I don't know how he's outing it, especially since it's at 4,000 attack. It's kind of like a pseudo Dragoon against that deck, but I guess Quad is also really good, too, against him. But he goes first and just, like, sets 2 and passes. I start with Zeta, tribute Gamma, and he ashes it. I then use Gamma to tribute the Zeta, and he activates there can be only one. So this is where things got a little tricky. From here, I think I try to go into a Phoenix, which is hit with an Imperm, I want to say. Or maybe I just go into Link Karibo Beat at one point. And I remember late in the game, I searched Quadrantits off of an Alpha. Then I used Meteonis to tribute 2 other Drytron names I had in my hand that I couldn't put on the field. So I just have like Link Karibo plus Quad, and he is at like 4,200, and I had 4,300 on board, and I just swing in for a game, and there's nothing he could really do about it. I also tried to use Quad's effect, and he Widow Anchored it, but it like didn't really matter because he didn't have enough spells to take the Quad, so we just poked in for exact game, and we take that match 2-0 very, very swiftly. Round 2, we played against Dragon Link, which we did win 2-0 as well. I won die roll game 1, and I can't remember much from it, but I think I did get hand trapped maybe a couple times, Imperm Ash, but was able to recover and grind it out and win thanks to, I think, like a clutch Orange Light or so, or an Imperm on one of his plays, because I was playing Imperm for this tournament, mainly to deal with Appaloosa, but I didn't play against any Tri-Brigade, lo and behold. And then game 2, my opponent goes first, ends on IP with Chaos Ruler and a Noct Division on his board, and I think I actually Dark Ruler it, which I don't think I really needed to. I was just really caught up in the one Nightmare Unicorn that he was going to get, but I should have just like not have used the Dark Ruler. But either way, I just get into a Zeus and with 4 materials, and he can just not come back from that at all. Then round 3, we played against a Dino deck, and I did win the die roll there. I go first and basically do my entire combo uninterrupted, ending with Mirage Light, Link Karibo, Ultimus, and Beatrice. I think I ended my turn with 3 fairies in hand, and in my opponent's draw phase, I activate Beatrice, detaching to try and dump Ava, and he has an Imperm. Now, again, I think I only have 3 fairies in hand, so I see the Imperm, and I'm like, okay, I'll just negate the Imperm, but I completely forgot about Droplet, which of course he did chain Droplet. He sent off the Imperm, a Coatlas, and a Baby Sarasaurus. So that kind of put me in a bit of a pickle, because I think I tried to negate the Imperm by pitching an Orange Light, which I should not have done. If I would have kept the Orange Light in hand, I would have had at least 1 Orange Light negate. In hindsight, I probably should have just let the Imperm go through. That way I would have had a live Orange Light in my hand, but it is what it is. And he basically just ends on UCT with Oviraptor, and I think he also summoned a Pank to pop my Ultimateness, which was completely fine. But on my turn, I'm able to get a live Orange Light. Thanks to a Ben 10 search. He tries to UCT me, I negate, and then I talent him to steal his Oviraptor to go for game. So we basically OTK game 1. Game 2, my opponent goes first, sets Lost World, or plays Lost World and sets 1. This set ended up being a Torrential, and I play through it and put up a board that he can't get through because he didn't see any dinos ultimately. So we ended up taking that match 2-0 as well against Dino. And that brings us to round 4, where I played against my good friend Adam, who was on VW, and I luckily did win the die roll again. But it wasn't such a great opening hand, and he did have a lot of hand traps because I had to rely on Chaos Ruler to recover from the lackluster hand that I have, and that was met with a hand trap. So as you can kind of tell, we were in a losing position there anyways, and main decking Imperm against VW did not help me whatsoever in that particular matchup. Game 2 was a rather interesting game and how it was decided. He did have a Cycle Reader for me at one point, and I luckily did have a Orange Light. And I think at one point I got Ultimatus on board, used Delta to try to draw a card, and it drew me into an Ava, which was nuts. And my opponent drew for turn and scooped, and I showed him what I drew off the Delta, and he was like, wow, you're actually cracked, because that 1 negate off the Ultimus would have turned into 2 more negates thanks to Ava, so I could have negated 3 of his cards. So that brings us to the game 3, which was a really interesting game 3. He goes first, sets 2, and passes. I start with Nova. He activates Order. I put a Zeta on board to grab Meteonis, make Link Karibo, and poke him for 3. Pass turn. My opponent has to pass as well. On my turn, I think I just pass again. After poking him for 3, he passes. I make a Phoenix, pop his Chuchi, because he had a live Chuche at this point. I pop that instead of the Order, and then it's just Nightmare Phoenix beatdown for the rest of the game. And yeah, that's how game 3 played out. Wasn't really a good opening for either of us. I was just able to win in the simplified game state just by having a Nightmare Phoenix on board, which is why I don't want to cut that card, because I want to make space for Black Rose, but I definitely have no space for it, really. The access code that my friend was letting me borrow never came up. So I think I still am going to keep it in the extra deck, though, over Boral Sword 100%. But yeah, that's how our tournament played out. It was really good. We went 4-0, and the only thing we need to do today is try to replicate that. And like I said, I was going to be showing you guys the deck list I used to go 4-0 with. So let's go ahead and take a look at that now and talk about the differences between this list and the last list I showed you guys in the previous episode. So I believe the only difference in the main deck is Imperm over Ash, and the reason I've chosen Imperm over Ash is basically for 3 reasons, mainly 4 technically. It doesn't lose a call by, it does not trigger talents, and it outs Appaloosa and Anaconda, which I really like, whereas Ash Blossom does not check any of those boxes, so that's why it's in the main. And that's really the only difference. The only difference in the extra deck is the access code talker. I think access code fits this deck a lot better to OTK than Boral Sword does, especially with Natasha just bumping this thing up to 53. We just need like a 2700 body, which is very, very easy to do, especially with Chaos Max in the deck, or just getting like a Mubeta on field with an Ida 10. So easy to OTK, and also the removal makes it very easy to open up the board to go for said OTK. But again, that's like the only thing I changed in the extra deck. And now we're going to go ahead and quickly take a look at the side deck, where there's only a difference of about 4 cards. The first card that I cut was Red Reboot in place of this guy, Quadrantids. And the reason this is in here over Red Reboot is because it's searchable, and is a counter to back or heavy decks, much like Reboot was. This card is really strong against decks like Sky Striker and Eldritch, simply because it cannot be targeted by my opponent's spell and trap card effects, which is just literally insane. And then not to mention that, like on our turn, it's a Harpy's Feather Duster, which is also really good. And coming out at 4,000, a lot of back or heavy decks might have a very hard time dealing with this card. And then the other change is Contact C, which is in here in place of Phantasmate. The main reason I was playing Phantasmate was to help against the Tri-Brigade matchup, and I guess you could also say the Prank Kids matchup, but I think Contact C is much, much higher impact against the Tri-Brigade deck and the Prank Kids deck than the Phantasmate, because if you drop Contact C on them after they link using their banish effects, Contact C will pretty much end their turn unless they have a Forbidden Chalice. Same thing could be said too with the Prank Kids deck. If they open with Pandemonium and you drop the Contact C on them, they can only summon Pranks for the rest of the turn, which means they can't link for the Earth Charmer link or IP Masquerena with this card. So again, they also have to hard draw the Forbidden Chalice to out it, which means it's one less interruption for us to have to deal with going into their board. Which I find to be like the most difficult thing to deal with. So yeah, that's the deck list, and overall, again, I think it performed very, very well. And the next thing I want to talk about is the changes I want to make going forward into our last Saturday locals. All right, so while I pack up for locals, I want to talk to you guys really quickly about one major change I've made to the deck and why I've made it. Last night, I did have a couple of friends over, and we did get in some really good play testing. I got to play against the Prank Kids deck, VW, and the Phantom Knight Burning Abyss deck. And one of the changes I made, and I believe like the only change I made, was cutting Blue Eyes Chaos Max Dragon actually for a copy of Draconids, and I'll explain why. The main reason I did this was because there was a very specific interaction when I was playing against the Phantom Knight deck, where not having a ritual to send off Mubeta kind of cost me, because at that point I had remembered a play that my friend Partho likes to make a lot in his Drytron build, which is where he ends on Mubeta with a material and Draconids and a Mirage Light. It's a really solid board to go into and kind of fall back on if you get hand trapped and can't end on ultimateness, or if you just don't open that well. Like having the 2 spell and trap negates from Mubeta and Mirage Light, and then the double quick effect send from Draconids is really, really strong. Not to mention the resource recursion you get from Mirage Light, and just in general how hard it is to get over Draconid. You know, having seen that play a couple times in my head, and then having it come up in that moment, I was like, I really should play Draconids, because this is something that's probably going to come up a lot more often, especially since you can get so much more utility out of having Draconids in the deck, especially paired with Mubeta Fafnir. And a lot of people actually do forget that Mubeta has a third effect where it can negate a spell or trap by detaching a material while you control a machine ritual monster, which in our case is always going to be Draconid. So that is why I'm putting the card back in the deck, because I just want to have that play in our wheelhouse. I don't feel too good about the deck not having that option, because it's just a really, really strong option. Like, why pass it up if we don't have to? Because again, it's a really underrated board, and it definitely gets the job done if we can't, get to ultimateness. So we're going to play that tonight, and I have very good hopes about it. So now with my bag all packed up, we're going to head out to locals. Alright, it is 5:57 and we've arrived at locals nice and early, which is what I always like to do. So like usual, let's go in and get everything all set up. Alright, so we're making one sort of last minute tweak to the deck. I'm adding a copy of Foolish Burial to the main, and I've cut the third Gamma because drawing multiples of these is really, really bad. And in theory, it'd be much better to have a copy of Foolish in the hand, because this can become any Drytron name, whereas seeing, again, multiple Gamma is very, very suboptimal. The only other thing I'm trying to fit into the main deck right now is this copy of Fafnir, but not really sure what to cut. Might cut an Eva down to 1, but other than that, I'm not really sure. So I'm going to take a little bit of time here to try and figure that out, because I think I'd rather have the Fafnir and the Foolish in. If I can't find space for the Fafnir, I think just having the Foolish is good enough for now. Alright, so I've made the decision, and that was to cut Eva down to 1 in place of the Fafnir. That's just going to give us more consistency at seeing more Drytron names, and not to mention Fafnir has some pretty good protection for Meteonis, making it so they can't negate a ritual spells. And I mean, I'm a little hesitant on it, but I definitely don't want to drop Orange Light down to 2, because protecting our combos are really, really good. And if that ends up being the deciding factor of why we can't go 4-0, then so be it. But feeling really confident in this list, and might do a few test hands before we get started. Alright everybody, welcome to round 1 of our final locals with Drytron this month, and I hope you guys are excited for this one, because I definitely wasn't excited for my round 1 pairing, that's for sure. See, early in the video I said that I was testing with some friends the previous night. Yeah, the person I'm playing against here is my friend John, who was one of those people. So I have to play against a testing partner round 1, which I was definitely not very happy about. But it is what it is. I definitely have some experience in the VW matchup, and I wasn't feeling totally unprepared. So I was like, you know what? I'll accept the challenge. And to make matters worse, I did lose the die roll, which is really unfortunate. But I think my opponent opened double Desires and Prosperity, so he definitely had a very suboptimal hand, but it was good enough to at least get him started on some sort of combo. He opened with the Kowloon and went ahead and activated a Chuche from the deck. Now, in my opening hand, I only had one going second card, and of course, it had to be the Imperm, a card that honestly 80% of the time isn't really effective at all versus VW, but this happened to be one of those like very lucky instances where my opponent happened to be going the Zulkin route, and my Imperm did find some value being able to stop his Zulkin. And with the poor opening hand that he had, he was unfortunately forced to pass on Zulkin with Chuche and a couple cards left in hand, where my only goal was to try to break that board and make it so he could not recover. So I start my turn with a copy of Drytron Fafnir. That's right, that one of that we added in right before the tournament, being very, very loyal. And that goes ahead and searches us a copy of Drytron Nova, and I follow that up with Emergency 2 to go ahead and grab a Alpha. And then I use Alpha to tribute a Zeta in my hand, and that adds me Ben 10, and then I use Zeta, tribute the Ben 10, and my opponent has his first interruption, which is actually a Call by the Grave, which hits the Zeta, which is a little rough, but I'm still able to secure the Ben 10 search, which grabs me Diviner. I then activate Nova to bring out a Delta. I then commit the normal summon to Diviner, which goes through, dumping Herald to add Ida 10. And then after that resolves, my opponent decides to fire off the Chuche here, popping my Alpha, deciding that popping the Delta would be foolish since I have yet to use its effect, and leaving it on the board is the best case scenario. But I'm kind of cracked, and I do have the Gamma to extend into Mu Beta Fafnir, and Fafnir is great at this point because it's going to allow me to get access to Medionis, since I was not able to get to it earlier in the turn because my opponent hit the Zeta with a Called By. So successfully dumped the Medionis, and now I have two choices. I could either drop Delta by 1,000 to add it back to my hand, or I could drop Mu Beta Fafnir by 1,000 to add it back to my hand. And just to explain sort of my thought process at this point, I was trying to go for the end board where I get to the Draconids with Mu Beta Fafnir having a material to allow myself to have the double send quick effect and the spell trap negate with Mu Beta Fafnir for any King Longs or pots he may have in his hand. And I also believe it was the best possible end board I could make at the time with the cards I had left. Plus we had Drytron Fafnir up, which actually has a decent effect against his deck because we can drop the levels of his monsters to make it harder for him to Xyz or Synchro with, or not even be able to do any of those things at all. So I dropped the Delta by 1,000 to add back the Medionis, which again is a mistake because that's going to force me to have to use one of the Xyz materials underneath Mu Beta to be able to bring out Ida 10. And if I would have done it the opposite way, I could have just tributed off the Delta to bring out Ida 10 to recycle the Ritual spell back to my hand. And from there, I could overlay with the Ida 10 and the Diviner into Beatrice, which would send the Draconids from the deck to the grave. And then from there, since I had an extra Gamma in hand, I could tribute one material from the Mu Beta and the Gamma in my hand to bring out the Draconids to be able to have that spell trap negate live for the following turn. But I think one of the things I was caught on here, mentally at least, was trying to resolve the Delta because I had yet to do that, and I wanted to resolve Delta to draw a card for some reason, but that was just clearly the incorrect play. But either way, I still end on Draconids, Linkuriboh, and the Mu Beta with the Beatrice. So at this point, I'm like, it's not terrible. I can get access to Zeus, and I could possibly dump Ava on his turn for an Orange Light. And, you know, who knows? It might still be enough. So we end up establishing Zeus, and we have our Draconids on the board just chilling. My opponent has the Ash for my Beatrice, which sucks. He then follows that up with Prosperity, which doesn't reveal him too many good cards, except maybe like a Lulu and a King Long. And he takes a Lao and adds that to his hand. And then from there, he plays King Long, which turns off my Draconids, which is really unfortunate. And then from there, he actually Chuches off my Zeus, which I let go through. Because I still have the Fafnir up, which I wanted to leave on the board at all costs to be able to make it so I could level mod his plays. But looking back, I definitely should have just chained the Zeus and cut my losses at that point. Fast forward a little bit, my opponent is able to get to the M7 with the Bamboozling Gossip Shadow, and he passes turn. He actually made a huge misplay. He never attacked with one of his Xyz monsters. He only attacked with the GG, and he was not able to get into Zeus because of that, but it did not matter. One of the last cards I had in my hand was Talons because of the Delta draw the previous turn, so I guess going for the Delta draw did kind of pay off somewhat. But I start my turn with a Gamma, pitching a copy of Ultimatus from my hand to the grave, and he bamboozles it. We each draw. I then play the Talents to draw 2, which if he had made Zeus, I could have just Talents the Zeus, and that would have forced it out, allowing me to play Nova. And then from there, you know, either way, I can still basically get access to the Mu Beta Fafnir, which allows me to establish Draconids again, or Ultimatus, and just kind of secure the game there. So after I do that, my opponent goes ahead and scoops. He was kind of caught up on the Zeus thing, but again, I had talent, so ultimately I don't think it mattered regardless. So let's go ahead and head into game 2. So unfortunately in game 2, I had to go second into a somewhat okay board of Bamboozling Gossip Shadow plus Chuche. I had Imperm plus Diviner, and I started my turn by Imperming the Bamboozling, then normaling the Diviner to pop it, and I really couldn't do much else past that. I misplayed it like crazy. Obviously, the play would be to normal the Diviner, send Entis, try to get a draw off Bamboozle, but for some reason, I just missequenced it like that, so I ended up losing game 2 very, very quickly, but game 3, as you can see here, and there's footage missing because my camera actually ended up dying very early on, and I did not have time to put a battery in it until I was floodgated by Droll, you know, a couple of times, and my opponent is able to establish a really strong board with Shen Shen and Stardust Charge into Zeus, and with Chuche too. So like at this point, there is definitely not much I can do. I try all I can to play through it, you know, having Emergency and several other extenders, but my opponent has another Droll and an Ash on top of that, so like there was just absolutely zero way I was playing through it. So I bricked game 2 and just got blown out like crazy game 3. So as much as I hate to say it, we're starting this tournament here in our 4th week off with a 0-1 record, but let's see if we can try to turn it around. Alright, round 2 just finished up, and we played against a Mech Knight Invoked deck. Pretty interesting strategy. He made us go first both games 1 and 2, which is to be expected. But what I wasn't expecting is him to open Super Poly both games 1 and 2. Luckily, it didn't matter. He wasn't able to do much game 1. He couldn't OTK. I think he ended on Yellow, Muddy Muddragon, or just Muddragon the Swamp, and a Cyframe Lord Lambda. And we're just able to access code OTK, even though I definitely messed it up. Yeah, I definitely messed it up because I went to make Nightmare Phoenix, and I used Natasha to make it, and I was expecting just to be able to take his stuff. But I realized Muddragon was protecting all of his things from targeting, which turns off Natasha. So I had to go into an access code first, then pop the Muddragon, and then start taking these with Natasha, and he conceded after that. Game 2, I went first, did full combo again. Didn't miss the second Eva because we comboed correctly, where we didn't need to use Beatrice in the draw phase, which was really, really awesome. So again, we don't really need that second Eva at all. We're just asking to hit with a droplet in that draw phase, and we try to send it to the grave or an Imperm or something, or it's just going to get hit with an Ash or Called By. So didn't miss it there. Took a clean 2-0 against that deck. It's unfortunate that he has to make me go first, but that's just the nature of his deck. He didn't draw any Invoke cards either, he told me, so that also kind of played a factor, but I still can't believe there's 40 people here tonight, and I get paired up against one of my testing partners who I literally played no less than like 15, 16 hours ago, which is really unfortunate. Game 3 was just a shit show on my end. He had like double Droll, Ash. I literally couldn't do anything. Not to mention game 2, as you guys saw in my opening hand, was like next to unplayable, which is really, really unfortunate. But I mean, Gate kept yet again from going 4-0 here on Saturday, but the main goal at this point is to win out. We have 2 more rounds to go, and I definitely think we can at least go 3-1, get some more store credit, and if we can do that, there's a little bit of a prize at the end that I have to show you guys if we can do it, but only if we go 3-1. I was definitely going to do if we were going to go 4-0. But this guy right here is really good at playing Virtual World, so we're not going 4-0. But you guys will really like it, trust me. So I'll update you guys in a little bit. Okay, everybody, here we are in round 4. We are fresh off of a victory from the previous round. We played against VW again. Yeah, 2 VW matchups in one night. Kind of like the previous week where we played 2 Tri-Brigades. But yeah, we are 2-1 right now, and we need to win this to go 3-1 and secure that 15 store credit. But here we are playing against Tri-Brigade one more time, and we actually played against the same Tri-Brigade player the previous week, I believe, in round 4 as well, or it might have been round 3, might have been back-to-back Tri-Brigades, and here we did lose the die roll, and my worst nightmare was starting to come true, but I was confident that my deck building changes would come to the rescue, and that I would see that copy of Infinite Impermanence to smite Appaloosa the moment I begin my turn, but unfortunately that did not happen, and I was forced to stare down Appo with 2 negates and double Dragon Lords with no imperm, and if there was ever going to be a final test for our deck to go through, this was certainly going to be it. So he ends on Appo 2 negates, the double Dragon Lords, and I believe a hand trap in hand. I lead with the Nova, which is going to put immediate pressure on both his Appaloosa and his double Dragon Lord, so he fires the Ash. Makes total sense. I then activate the Drytron Fafnir, coming in clutch yet again, being very loyal today, the one of, and that goes ahead and searches a copy of Meteonis Drytron. I play Prep. Prep grabs the Ben 10, and then I go ahead and use Foolish Burial, another new addition to the deck, coming in very handy as well, and that is going to dump Alpha to the grave, where I then try to use Alpha in grave, pitching a Gamma, trying to hold this Ben 10 as long as I possibly can, and to my surprise, he actually lets the Alpha go through, allowing me to search a Ritual monster, which I grab that of the Ida 10, and then from there I activate Meteonis to bring out the Ida 10, to add back Meteonis, and my opponent uses the negate there from Appaloosa, not allowing me to grab the Ritual spell back, which I thought was pretty interesting. From there, I go to the battle phase, or at least attempt to leave main phase, and try to clear this Appaloosa, but my opponent uses the double Dragon Lords to bounce it back to my hand, which, to be honest, I am perfectly okay with having that Ida 10 in my hand to be able to use for more tribute fodder. Now, with Appo only having 1 negate left, I pitch the Ben 10 for the Gamma, and again, as expected, he negates the Gamma, but the Ben 10 search is going to go through here uncontested, allowing me to grab a copy of Orange Light. And the only reason I searched the Orange Light is because I had an Eva in hand and I did not have many plays left to make, so I wanted to have at least 2 monster negates as he went into his next turn. And it is basically either he kills me that turn or I come back and win the next. So on his turn, he links into the Doom Eagle, summons out the Knight, aka Fleur-de-Lis, then normal summons Karaz and banishes for cost to attempt a link summon, and I hit it with the Orange Light, pitching off Orange and Eva. I banish Orange and Ben 10 to add Diviner and Orange, and then from there, I don't think he does much else besides swing in with a hefty amount of damage, and I start my turn by normal summoning the Diviner. That dumps Arclight, and I go ahead and search off Arclight, the Natasha, and from here we just pretty much clean up the game. No issue. We get access to Mubeta Fafnir, go into Beatrice, bring out Natasha, and start taking his monsters. And, well, the only monster he had left, which was Fleur, and we just OTK. No problem. So we take game 1, even though we lost the die roll and had to play through Appaloosa Dragon Lord. So let's take a look at game 2. So you can bet that in game 2, I did side in, I believe, Twins as well as the Contact Seas. And did I draw any? Of course not. We out here not drawing our side deck cards on a day-to-day basis. But my opponent, as expected, opts to go first, leads with the Tanky for Fractal, and does Kit Nerval. You know, the classic Tri-Brigade shenanigans. I don't have any hand traps, and he's able to end on the double Dragon Lords, Appaloosa for 2, and 1 set. So I'm thinking, oh boy, it was pretty bad in game 1, and now it's going to be even worse to try to get through this board. But on my turn, I lead with the Diviner. That gets negated immediately. I then use Delta, pitching the Natasha. That goes through, allowing me to reveal the Ida 10 to draw into a new card. And then I'm about to go into my signature play, something we did like basically almost the exact same play we did in week 3 where we had Diviner Delta. We linked them both into Nightmare Phoenix so that it was co-linked with Appaloosa, and now we've got the triple threat on lock. So we go ahead and pitch off of the Nightmare Phoenix a copy of Gamma to hit the set back row. Now I was expecting my opponent to just outright negate this with the Appaloosa, but he actually chains the Revolt. And obviously that brings out Omen, which is okay because I still get my draw off of Nightmare Phoenix because it was co-linked when it was activated. And the extra draws certainly do help. And then I activate Gamma, Engrave, pitching Alpha, and my opponent attempts to negate as expected with the Appaloosa, but I do have a live orange light by this point, and Gamma brings out Alpha, and then he uses the double Dragon Lords to bounce the Gamma. Now from here, I'm trying to think of a good way of how I can get my Alpha Engrave while also keeping some board presence to possibly try to OTK. So what I decided to do is actually use Meteonis to tribute off the Alpha to bring out Natasha. That puts my Alpha in the grave, allowing me to tribute the Gamma that he bounced back to my hand to summon the Alpha, and that searches me a copy of Ben 10. I then link both the Natasha and the Alpha into IP Mascarena, and this is why, again, I couldn't make Link Karibo there, if that made any sense, because you can't use Link Karibo to get into IP, and I had already exhausted my other Link too, which was Phoenix. So then I bring out Natasha, banishing Ida 10 to take his Shurig. I gain a bunch of life points. I then go into the battle phase to clear his double Dragon Lords, and hit in with 800 damage from the IP and pass turn. He normal summons the Nerval, and frame 1, I activate IP to go into Unicorn, discarding Meteonis to spin that back. And after that, he doesn't have anything else to do, so we just go ahead and go into Gamma, and that is pretty much just game, bringing back the Alpha in attack position. So we take that match against Tri-Brigade Dogmatica 2-0, and we didn't even draw the Imperm. I guess we didn't even need it. Alright, the tournament is now wrapped up. We just finished our round 4 matchup, which is against Tri-Brigade Dogmatica. And both games we had to play through Appaloosa and Double Dragon Lords, which is a really hard board for us to break. I did not draw Imperm game 1 or Talents. And then same thing with game 2, did not draw Contact C, Imperm, or Talents until I think a little bit later. Yeah, really solid performance against the deck. Like I said, going into this, it was going to be one of our hardest matchups just because how good Appaloosa is, and I'm really proud with how we actually dealt with that deck and were able to take a 2-0. And then round 3, we played against VW. Talents came in so incredibly clutch game 3 when we got shut down. Our Diviner got hit with Valor, and then he judgmented our Mu Beta. Talents, I'm pretty sure, let us survive another turn because I was scared of Nibiru. I really would have liked the 2 draws, but going for the hand rip was a lot safer in the end. And overall, like, just the changes I made beforehand, where I added in the Foolish and the Fafnir and cut in the second Gamma and Eva, I really like those changes. Didn't miss the third Gamma, did not miss the second Eva because, like, I never really ended on ultimateness. Like, I don't think I summoned it, like, I think I summoned it a couple times, like twice against our round 2 matchup, but it didn't even matter because he had Super Poly both games, and lucky for us, he did not have enough gas to push through our board, so that's really cool. I definitely think 1 Eva is perfectly fine. I love Talents in the deck, would play it any day of the week over Prosperity and Droplets. So we finished 3-1, we get 15 store credit. And we're going to be picking up a little prize, if you will, with our store credit. And I'm excited to show you guys what it is. So stay tuned for a little bit later on in the episode. But yeah. Also, one other thing, too, is the Draconids and Mu Beta play, where you have a material under Mu Beta and Draconids. I went for that a lot, and it's really strong. Having the Spell Trap negate and the double send is just, like, so good in a lot of matchups. So really happy I was able to pull that off more times than I was expecting I was going to be able to. It's definitely a combo I'm going to have to keep learning to know what cards I'll need to be able to actually pull it off. But it wasn't so bad today. I think I played pretty well for the most part. And yeah, we're going to get our first place profile, and then we'll head home and wrap everything up. Oh my goodness, that is fucking clean.
Pristine, bro.
Holy shit. Holy hell. I was not expecting to look this. It's like, this is like 1,000 times. Because like the Galaxy S has a little scratching on it and like a light dent.
Okay.
I mean, this has like a couple scratches on it, but like,
it's barely noticeable.
it's hard to find a ghoster that has nothing on it. right, so time for the wrap up, not only for last night's locals, but for the entire month. I gotta say, last night went very, very well. Even with the last minute changes that I made, I was really happy with my ability to adapt to the new build, and with it, the new plays that I wanted to make with said build. You know, everything involving the Draconids and the Mu Beta Fafnir, and I'm glad I did make the decision to cut the Chaos Max Dragon. But going into the matchups, it was really rough getting paired against my testing partner John on the Virtual World deck. It was a pretty good match. I mean, granted, I did kind of punt game 2, but I also did not open well. I have like a 96% chance of drawing one or more Drytrons with my build, so like the fact that I didn't draw one is really, really unlucky, and I also just played into that board really bad. I should have just baited the Gossip Shadow and tried to draw a card, and hopefully that got me somewhere, but for some reason I impermed it. And then game 3, which I wasn't able to record because this camera died, and I did not have time to put a new battery in and reset the focus because there was like 6 minutes left in the round, and I did not want to waste time doing that. But luckily you guys didn't miss much, because I got hit with like back-to-back Drolls and an Ash to put the final nail in the coffin, and he took that one 2-0 fair and square. Round 2, we played against Mech Invoked. He made us go first both games, and obviously even opening Super Poly both games, it didn't matter. We just got to go first and basically play uninterrupted pretty much both games. So no surprise win there. Round 3, we played against VW. Really happy that we're able to beat VW and not take another loss to it like we did round 1. And then round 4, we played against Tri Brigade, which I thought was kind of like poetic, because our main fear for Drytron, at least this past series for me, has been dealing with Tri Brigade boards in Appaloosa. And I really feel like we conquered that fear in that 4th and final round with the deck, when we had to play through Appaloosa for 2 negates, double Dragon Lords, Ash game 1, Appaloosa with 2 negates, double Dragon Lords, and Revolt game 3. So being able to play through those boards twice felt really rewarding and just feels like a victory in of itself. So really happy with how the build performed. Really happy with how I played, and I do really feel like we played against a nice pool of decks, you know, that really kind of challenged us here in the end. Now, we didn't go 4-0 on Saturday, but we did go 4-0 on Tuesday. Unfortunately, I did not record it, but we were still able to go 4-0 with Drytron, which feels really good. And one of the changes that's going to start happening with the series is I'm going to start recording all of my matchups on Tuesday, just so I have the footage there to recall and go back to it and show you guys the stuff if I need to. I'm not going to do an entire segment for the Tuesday locals, because that would just make this episode way longer and require like almost double the work that goes into these videos, and they already take long enough as is, believe me, like a couple days, 3-4 days to put these kinds of videos together. So all the likes, comments, and shares that go onto these videos, I really, really appreciate it, because it does take a lot of time and effort. But now let's go ahead and talk about what our grand total was with Drytron. Oh, and real quick, before we take a look at our record, I want to introduce you guys to a new sort of thing we'll be doing on this series to like reward ourselves for how well we do over that course of the month, and build up our collection in the process. You guys saw me looking at that Ghost Rare Majestic Star Dragon. Well, I actually ended up pulling the trigger on it because it just looks so incredibly clean. I was looking at a first edition Ghost Rare Galaxy Eyes, but it was a little too much for my liking. I mean, this card looks so out of this world, and it's a very nostalgic card for me as well. I love some of the Stardust cards. I actually have Majestic Dragon. I've had it for a long time. I must have pulled it from one of these packs, Stardust Overdrive, when I was a kid. And I always wanted the Synchro to go with it, so when I saw this card in the case as my next option after the Galaxy Eyes, I had to go for it. And with the 75 store credit I had on me at the time, I was able to get this beautiful card for only $28, and it is definitely staying in our collection. So really happy to have it in there. So I hope you guys are looking forward to this sort of new aspect to the series. But let's take a look at our overall record. We ended up going 25-7, 2 4-0 finishes on 2 separate Saturdays, one on August 3rd and one on August 21st. Our first week and the start of our 4th week, we were able to achieve 4-0. It's just not that elusive Saturday 4-0. But we did break the curse and we were able to get 4 O's in the series. I just kind of wish I would have recorded them, but it is what it is. And now, for the moment you've all been waiting for, the next deck we will be playing is a water deck, and it is Marincess. I was having a really hard time deciding between Mermail and Marincess, but I wanted to go with Marincess because it's a deck I really haven't shown any love to in a competitive setting, and I have a lot of good ideas for this deck, and I'm feeling really good about it because it's a nice control deck, kind of mid-range aggro, and I've got a lot of spicy techs we can throw into it along the way, and Access Code is a hell of a card. So I hope you guys are looking forward to the next One Deck, 1 Month with Marincess. We'll be back on the Rogue decks, because I know some people like that a bit more. And then we might do Mermail after that. So thank you guys so much for watching. If you want to see more of my content, click on one of the videos popping up on the bottom of the screen right now, and I'll see you guys in the next one. And like always, I want to give a huge shout out to all of the Divine level channel members who go above and beyond to support me in this channel, and they are Cadillacs84, Pony Stark, and Keith Sidgers. Thank you guys so much, as always, for your extremely generous support of this channel.